So there's this photo of Vladimir Putin before his decision to invade Ukraine that I just can't stop staring at. He's sitting in an ornate meeting room with fancy curtains on one end of a 30-foot table at what appears to be an important negotiation with the president of Azerbaijan. His counterpart presumably traveled a great distance to meet with the Russian leader, but it's clear that he's not going to get any closer than this. That photo was strange, but it got a lot weirder. It turns out that Putin takes a lot of meetings at opposite ends of insanely long tables. Here he is with French President Macron, and here he is meeting with other European diplomats. Obviously, part of this is a power play. It's how Putin shows that he's always in control of every situation. This isn't unique in and of itself. Lots of world leaders have used architecture to their advantage. The whole idea of meeting kings in a throne room was to set petitioners on a lower level from the monarch when discussing matters of state. Indeed, there's a famous photo of American President Lyndon B. Johnson using his own imposing height when he shook hands to seal a deal that accomplished a similar goal. But I think there's something more important to this story to tell about Putin's table that underscores a much more serious concern about how the Russian leader, with his finger on the nuclear button, is isolated from reality itself. As an aside, I've done videos about Putin's KGB plan to brainwash the world, as well as an existing Russian military plan to drop a single nuclear bomb that would supposedly deter a NATO invasion. These are related to what I'm talking about here, so go check those out if you haven't seen them yet. Just before the invasion began, Putin gave a frankly insane speech about how he was liberating Ukraine from its Nazi leadership and that he believed that the citizens of Ukraine would rise up against the leadership that was there and greet his troops as liberators. While this might have seemed like propaganda, the military plans he drew up really only accounted for a week-long war. Reports from the field were that his tanks didn't even have enough fuel on hand to last longer without resupply. His troops were literally starving. So his overly optimistic battle plan is, you could say, evidence that Putin really believed his lies. So there's this saying that absolute power corrupts absolutely, which we generally interpret to mean that without any checks and balances on a leader, that they tend to do really bad things. But what's missing from that statement is a real understanding of how that absolute power alters the way that a person sees the world, and that leads them to act in increasingly disturbing ways. Now, in 1993, Diana Alstad and Joel Kramer wrote a book called The Guru Papers, Masks of Authoritarian Power, about the psychological development and progression of cult leaders, which I think is sort of fitting here. The word cult usually conjures up images of increasingly erratic followers doing increasingly insane or even dangerous things. Obvious examples are the mass suicides in Jonestown and Heaven's Gate, but also the strange sexual activities of people like Geshe Michael Roach, who I wrote about in my book, The Enlightenment Trap. What people forget about cult leaders is that they almost never start out as extremely insane as what we see in their final form. Alstad and Kramer were some of the very first cult deprogrammers, and they documented how cults go through different stages that correspond to the cult leaders' progressive isolation at the top of their religious community. To explain, I'm going to ask you to put yourself in the position of someone who believes that they've heard a divine message. You've just had some sort of profound insight into the nature of reality and want to tell the world about it. Maybe God is speaking to you. Or maybe you've seen the ultimate truth of the world and know that you are enlightened. As you start telling the world about your insights, you will start to collect followers who believe what you're telling them about the world. And they'll start to think that your speech, your ideas, might actually be more real than ordinary reality. In the beginning, cults begin with honorable seeds. They preach about love and community, and they really bring people together into a close-knit group around their spiritual leader. But once that guru stops thinking that anything else is real and simultaneously achieves his ascendant place in his followers' minds, well, then we have a real problem. You see, when you're the only enlightened person in a room, you don't have any peers anymore. There's no one who can call you on your own bullshit or put any checks on your growing power. If you talk to other supposedly enlightened individuals, you most likely won't agree on anything. It's at this point that cults really start to go off the rails. Once somebody is infallible, there aren't any rules anymore. There's no way to verify someone's ideas with an independent party. There's no sense of objectivity. And that's when cult leaders give in to their basest instincts. For example, and this is true, male cult leaders tend to start sleeping with their prettiest students because who is to say that their libido isn't equally enlightened? If things get really strange, then the guru might lose some followers, but the people who stick around him find ways to rationalize his behavior. Anyone who disagrees with the holy commandments is either ignored or cast out of the group altogether. If something that they do crosses too many cultural norms, or if the press starts to write about the various abuses that the cult inflicts on their followers, Kramer and Alstad say that they will close ranks and even possibly stockpile weapons to defend their guru's truth. Now, I've seen this happen at a Tibetan Buddhist cult in Arizona called Diamond Mountain. In that group, followers took vows to never lie, and it was part of their Buddhist faith. But when asked about the guru's failures, about strange deaths that were happening in the community, people bent to the truth towards whatever direction they felt would benefit them at the moment. They overlooked the contradiction in their own philosophy, which was never lying, by saying that lying was okay if it served a higher purpose. Again, reality just didn't matter anymore. It was all about power at that point. Everyone in the group believed that they were following the perfect wisdom of their leader, despite their dwindling bank accounts, splintered relationships, and even these deaths and stabbings that were caused by their spiritual practices. The whole story is in another video and a book that I called The Enlightenment Trap, and I'll link to them, down there. But the point of talking to you about the peculiar psychology of cult leaders is that it is obvious, to me at least, that Putin is in this same camp. He's surrounded by yes men who tell him whatever he thinks must be true, and he's both literally, in the sense of that table where he's not near anyone, and mentally isolated from reality. He's lived so long in a world of lies and half-truths that he believes he is completely infallible. He will kill people simply to prove that his worldview is the only one that matters. Isolated cult leaders are incredibly dangerous when things don't go their way. They can sometimes make even suicidal decisions. Alstad and Kramer note that the self-centered guru has to do everything they can to maintain control, or their own worldview will come crashing down around their heads with sometimes catastrophic consequences. The only way to fix their insanity is to remove the constant external reinforcement, which means removing them from power. And that's going to be pretty hard to do with Putin, but it's at least instructive to know how the power structure around him might be reinforcing his own personal psychology. So, thanks much for watching this video. Do you think there might be other or even better explanations for what's going on with Putin? Maybe you have some secret intelligence that might shed light on what's going on and ultimately how to stop this sort of chaos that's happening in Ukraine. I'd love to know in the comments down below. Please like, please subscribe, and, please tell me what you might want to see me cover next. All right, thank you so much.